We've been talking together about conflict. We've talked about the need for a multi-layered approach. The first layer the first frame that we can work on is to see things from a structural perspective. The structural frame, as you'll recall, sees everything in terms of roles and responsibilities. So it sees that the problem and the solution lives in the structural frame. So if you and I are having a dispute, immediately what's going to happen is that anyone from the structural frame is going to see what are their roles. So for example, if you and I are having a dispute and it would see that the structural frame would define authority. If we are friends, we have equal authority. If we are co-workers, where we're on the same level, we might have equal authority. If we are, if one of us is the boss, then the boss might have more structural authority. If we're working on a project together where we're co-workers, but the project has assigned me to be in charge, then I might see myself as authority. Over and over again, what's happened is that when you're dealing with the structural frame, you see things in terms of roles and responsibilities. So the other thing that can happen in a structural frame is that instead of just roles, we might look at responsibilities. It might be that you and I are co-workers who are supposedly equal, but on this particular project, I've been assigned the lead. In other words, I bear a responsibility that allows me to be in charge of you. Now, the problem with this is that often these kinds of structural calculations are not written out. You know, what I just described there, where we're on a project together and I think I'm in charge. It may well be that you think that you have responsibilities that put you in charge. And so part of what we're talking about is the structural frame, you know, of how authority plays out. But here's the tricky part. You and I might be talking, and I might live in the structural frame, and you might live in the relational frame. And so if I start talking about roles and responsibilities, you might have no idea why I'm doing this, because you think that conflict is all about relationships. So yes, we have to be able to be good leaders who can see things from the structural frame. But if we only try to work in the structural frame, we will likely fail, because everyone around us is multi-layered themselves. But let's ask, okay, let's for the sake of argument, for just a moment before we start talking about the multi-layered approach, let's just focus on the structural frame. How would be a way to deal with a conflict in the structural frame? Well, the first thing you would do is pay attention to the authority. And then the person who's in authority would guide the conversation. The person in authority would then determine the process and determine how we're going to go about having the conversation, and would assign different responsibilities. So for example, if you and I are having a dispute about a car wash, you know, and it is a car wash that our church is going to run because I am the youth minister and you're the missions pastor, and the youth group is going to go on a mission trip, and we're raising funds for using a car wash. Now, who's in charge there? Well, from a structural frame, it would be easy for me as the youth minister to say, this is a youth event to raise money for the youth, and therefore I'm in charge. And if you're the missions pastor, it would be very easy for you to say, this is about a mission trip to raise money for people going on a mission trip, therefore I'm in charge. Now we've got this place where you have to recognize that part of the conversation itself is not just about what we're deciding, but it's about the authority of how we're going to get to decide. What do you do in that moment? You make it discussable, because there's a mixed message there. The mixed message says, I'm in charge and so are you. Well, we can't have both of us in charge. One of my friends has a quote that the best way to starve a horse is to assign two people to feed it. You can't have two people to have responsibility. So what we're going to do is you might say, wait a second, let's make this discussable, and let's talk together about what your responsibilities will be and what mine are, and then we're going to talk about them together. But if all we do is just keep arguing with each other, and each of us claim I'm in charge and try and grab all the authority for ourselves, we will fail. Part of the way that you have to deal with any kind of structural conflict is to narrate the authority, to say out loud, this is where I think you have authority, this is where I have authority, and to have a conversation about that as part of the structural conversation. So the first part of any multi-layered approach to conflict is to understand the structural frame.